So the afternoon was typical of early spring in Geneva, with the chill just beginning to lift, and the sun casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. David Morrow, a cultural anthropologist renowned for his work on interspecies communication, was tidying his small, book-laden study, a room that doubled as a guest area. Today it would welcome Mira, his visitor from Siloth, an opportunity both daunting and exhilarating. As he arranged the last few books on the shelf, his friend and colleague Tom Jensen arrived. Tom was an exobiologist with a knack for turning any conversation towards the unknown. "Ready to play host, David?" Tom grinned, placing a friendly hand on David's shoulder. "Honestly, I'm more ready for a sabbatical than an intergalactic cultural exchange," David admitted, straightening a stack of papers. "But the opportunity to interact with someone from Zeloth is too good to pass up." Tom chuckled. "Just think of the papers we could write." David shook his head in mild amusement as the sound of a vehicle approached. They moved to the window, watching as a sleek, unmarked car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and a figure stepped out, clad in a seamless, silver suit that shimmered in the sunlight, a stark contrast to the earthy tones of Geneva. Mira had arrived. Stepping outside, David and Tom greeted her formally. Mira's eyes, a deep violet, scanned her surroundings with an air of serene curiosity. "Welcome to Earth, Mira. I'm David, and this is Tom," David introduced, offering a hand in the human custom. Mira took his hand, her grip tentative. "Thank you, David." "Tom, I am pleased to be here and to learn from you." Tom, ever the enthusiast, jumped straight in. "And we're excited to learn from you as well. What's Zeloth like this time of year?" Her smile was small but genuine. "It is our growing season, warm, with the canopies in full bloom." As they entered the house, David led Myra to her room, explaining basic amenities, keen on making her feel comfortable. "Your room," he gestured, "and feel free to ask us anything about Earth, humans, anything at all." Mira nodded, her gaze lingering on a photograph of the Swiss Alps. "You have mountains and water, much like home, yet very different." They spent the next few hours in conversation. David explained various aspects of human life, from the mundane to the complex. Samira was particularly intrigued by the kitchen appliances, asking detailed questions about their function. "You use so many machines for food preparation," she observed, examining a blender. Tom laughed. "Wait until you see a toaster." Dinner was a simple affair, yet novel for Mira. David had prepared a variety of dishes to offer a taste of Earth cuisine. Mira tried each cautiously, expressing her thoughts diplomatically. "This is very flavorful," she said after sampling a spicy dish. "As is your diplomacy," David teased lightly, earning a curious tilt of Mira's head. As night fell, they settled into the living room, a fire crackling softly in the background. "Tomorrow we'll show you around Geneva," Tom said. "There's a lot to see, and we hope you'll find it as enriching as we find your presence here." Mira's voice was soft, thoughtful. "I am already finding it so, Tom." "David, thank you for your hospitality and patience." David nodded, feeling the weight and wonder of their task. Here, in his cozy Geneva home, they were embarking on something truly monumental, a real-time exchange of worlds. It was more than academic. It was a bridging of galaxies. As the evening drew to a close, all three felt the first stirrings of what pro. The morning dawned bright and clear, with the promise of a warm day. David prepared a light breakfast, setting out fresh fruit and pastries. Mira joined him in the kitchen, observing his actions with a thoughtful air. "Does your day always start with such abundance?" Mira asked, her eyes scanning the colorful spread. David chuckled as he poured coffee. "On some days, yes. It's a little way to appreciate the morning. How about on Zeloth?" "We consume nutrient blends mostly." "Efficiency over form," she replied, her gaze lingering on a sliced kiwi. Tom strolled in, a wide smile on his face. "Morning, everyone. Ready for the grand tour, Myra?" She nodded, taking a tentative bite of kiwi. "I am curious about your city." After breakfast, they set out on foot. Geneva was bustling, the streets alive with the energy of people and the charm of old buildings juxtaposed with modern design. As a cultural anthropologist, David began, guiding Mira along a busy street. I find cities fascinating. They're like living museums of a society's priorities and values. Mira absorbed his words, watching as people hurried by. And what do these movements tell you? That life here is fast-paced, but there's a rhythm to it, a routine that keeps everything balanced, David explained. They made their way to the lake, where the water shimmered under the sun. Tom pointed to a group of children playing near the water. Look, Mira, those are human younglings, children, as we call them. She watched them with interest. They are learning through play. Fascinating. We educate our young in learning centers from early development stages. The human approach is a bit more varied. Education, yes, but there's a strong emphasis on social skills developed through interaction, Tom noted. Their next stop was the local market. The air was rich with the smells of fresh produce and spices. David introduced Mira to various vendors, explaining the concept of trade and commerce. This is an apple, David said, handing one to Mira. Try it. She examined the apple curiously, then took a bite. Her face brightened, sweet, crisp, very pleasant. A vendor, amused by Mira's reaction, offered her a piece of cheese. Try this with the apple, he suggested. Mira did so, her expression thoughtful. A peculiar combination, yet it harmonizes well. They continued their tour, visiting the historical parts of the city. David and Tom took turns explaining the significance of various landmarks. Mira listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that showed her deep understanding and interest. As the day wore on, they stopped at a cafe for a brief rest. Sitting outside, they enjoyed the view of the bustling street. Mira, how does this compare to a Shiloh city? Tom inquired, sipping his coffee. Zealoth cities are quieter, more structured. There's less spontaneous interaction. Everything is planned for efficiency, Mira responded. David leaned back in his chair. It sounds very orderly. Here perhaps there's more chaos, but in that chaos there's a kind of freedom, don't you think? Yes, I see that, Mira agreed, her eyes scanning the crowd. There is beauty in this chaos, a vibrancy that Zealoth lacks. The conversation drifted towards lighter topics, music, art, and entertainment, which captivated Mira's interest further. As they walked back towards David's home, the shadows lengthening with the setting sun, Tom reflected on the day. We've covered a lot, but there's so much more to share, he said, looking to Mira for her thoughts. This exploration, it enriches me, challenges my views. I am grateful, Mira said sincerely, her eyes meeting David's. David smiled, feeling a profound connection with their guest. And we're just getting started. As the days passed, Mira's understanding of human customs and her grasp of emotional nuances deepened. One evening, while they were having dinner, a classic Earth film played in the background. Mira's attention seemed split between the meal and the screen. What are your thoughts on the film, Mira? David asked, observing her curious gaze. The emotional display is intense. Is this a typical example of human emotion? Mira questioned, tilting her head towards the screen where a dramatic scene unfolded. It's exaggerated for effect, but yes, films often explore the range of human emotions, David explained. They can be a good lens to understand what moves us. Tom, who had been quiet, chimed in. Do Scythians experience emotions similarly? I mean, do you have films or plays? Mira thought for a moment. We have simulations, yes, but they are mostly used for training purposes. Emotions are considered private. That's quite different from human culture, Tom noted, passing the salad. Here, sharing emotions is a way to connect with others. The conversation shifted as they moved to the living room, settling into the comfortable sofas. David decided it was a good opportunity to delve deeper. Mira, you mentioned emotions are private for Silothians. Can you explain more about that? Mira adjusted her posture, searching for the right words. Emotions are not shared openly, because they can influence others' decisions. We strive to maintain objectivity. David nodded. I see. Humans often find that sharing emotions can actually help in understanding one another better, even if it sometimes complicates things. Interesting, Mira murmured, her eyes reflecting a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Tom, eager to lighten the mood, suggested a game. Why don't we play a card game? It's a good way to relax and have some fun. As they played, Mira became increasingly competitive, a slight smile playing on her lips whenever she won a hand. It was during one of these rounds that she unexpectedly shared a laugh, a sound rare and delightful. David caught Tom's eye, and both men smiled. "You've got a good poker face, Mira. Ever considered a career in espionage?" David teased. Mira's laugh faded into a gentle chuckle. "Perhaps I am learning more than just human emotions." The game ended, but the night was still young. They moved on to discussing music, a universal language that seemed to intrigue Mira immensely. "Do you have music on Zigloth?" Tom inquired as he selected a few tracks from different genres to play. "Yes, but it is different. More rhythmic, less melodic," Mira described, listening intently to a classical piece. "This is soothing." David observed her reaction to the music, noting how certain melodies elicited a more visible response. Music can be very powerful in evoking emotions. Mira nodded, her eyes closed as she absorbed the sounds. "I am beginning to understand that." The evening drifted on with more music, and eventually Mira spoke of Zilothian arts, describing their focus on visual and tactile expressions. David and Tom listened, fascinated by the contrasts and similarities between their cultures. As Mira retired for the night, David reflected on the progress they had made. "She's opening up more. It's incredible to witness." Tom agreed, looking thoughtful. "It's like watching someone discover a new spectrum of colors." Indeed, for Mira, each day was an unveiling of a previously unknown palette, each human emotion and cultural nuance like a burst of color in what had once been a monochrome existence. As Mira's understanding of human culture deepened, her questions became more probing, particularly about human biology and reproduction. One quiet evening, while David was reading and Tom was tinkering with a model airplane, Mira broached the subject. "David, Tom, I have been reading about human biology," Mira began, her tone curious but cautious. "The process of human reproduction seems complex yet fundamentally vital to your social structures. Can you explain more about it?" David put down his book, recognizing the importance of her question. "Certainly, Mira. Reproduction is not just biological, but also carries significant emotional and societal implications for humans." Tom looked up from his model, interested in the conversation. "Yeah, it's about continuing the species, but it's also about forming bonds, families, and sometimes challenges." Mira nodded, absorbing the information. "In Zixlath, reproduction is mainly a matter of compatibility and contribution to the gene pool. It lacks the emotional aspects you describe." "That's quite different from Earth," David said. "Here, the emotional connection, especially in the context of a family, is considered as important as the biological act of reproduction itself." "How do these emotional connections influence human reproduction?" Mira asked, genuinely intrigued. Tom leaned in, joining the discussion more actively. "Emotions can complicate things. People choose partners based on love, which involves feelings of affection, trust, and sometimes even sacrifice. It's not just about biological compatibility." "Interesting," Mira murmured. "And what about the physical process? I mean, how is it experienced?" David and Tom exchanged a glance, considering how to address her question appropriately. "It's intimate and personal," David started, choosing his words carefully. "It involves a close physical connection, which is both an expression of love and a means to reproduce. It's also pleasurable, which strengthens the bond between partners." Mira's eyes widened slightly. "Pleasure? In reproduction? That is not a concept we are familiar with on Zilloth." "It's a big part of what makes humans unique in this regard," Tom added. "It encourages bonding and ensures the continuation of our species." As the conversation continued, David suggested a practical demonstration to help Mira understand human interactions better. "Tomorrow, why don't we visit the botanical gardens?" David proposed. "There are some aspects of human courting and interaction that are better understood in a natural, relaxed setting." Mira agreed, eager to learn more in a different context. The next day at the botanical gardens, David pointed out couples and families, explaining nonverbal cues and interactions. "See that couple?" David gestured discreetly. "Their body language leaning towards each other, maintaining eye contact, those are signs of affection and interest." Mira observed attentively. It seems so natural for them. It is, mostly, Tom said as he watched a father play with his children. These interactions are instinctual but also shaped by our culture and personal experiences. As they walked through the lush greenery, David explained the concept of dating, marriage, and family life, which were all integral to the human experience of reproduction. Many of these steps involve rituals, like dates or weddings, which are celebrations of the emotional bonds, David explained. Mira listened intently, her understanding of human culture deepening with every explanation. The trip to the gardens proved to be an excellent method for illustrating the complexities of human emotional and physical connections. By the end of their visit, Mira had a nuanced appreciation of human reproduction that transcended biology. The emotional depth and physical expressions of love were concepts that fascinated her, showcasing yet another layer of human complexity. As they headed home, Mira thanked them. "This has been very enlightening. Your willingness to share so openly is something I find very special about humans." David smiled, pleased with the progress. "We're glad to share, Mira. Understanding each other is the first step towards true friendship." In the days following their visit to the botanical gardens, Mira's curiosity about human relationships seemed to deepen, as did her comfort with discussing them openly. One evening, as the trio sat in the living room after dinner, Mira brought up the topic again. "David, Tom, you mentioned that human relationships often start with something you call dating. Can you explain more about how this progresses?" Mira asked, genuinely interested. "Sure," David began, setting his tea down. "Dating is essentially about spending time together, learning about each other. It's about sharing experiences and emotions, and if things go well, it can lead to a deeper relationship." Tom nodded in agreement. "It starts with simple activities like having coffee, going to the cinema, or walking in a park. If the couple feels comfortable, they might progress to more personal encounters, like meeting each other's families." "Is this progression similar to what we observed in the gardens?" Mira inquired, recalling their earlier outing. "Exactly," David replied. "It's about building trust and comfort. Sometimes it involves physical expressions like holding hands or kissing, which are signs of affection and deepen the emotional connection." Mira seemed to ponder this. "And these actions are consensual. How do humans initiate such intimacy?" "That's a good question," Tom said. "It's all about consent and mutual comfort. For example, one person might offer their hand to hold, and the other can either accept or decline. Would it be possible to see such an initiation?" "For educational purposes, of course," Mira asked cautiously, her curiosity academic yet respectful. David considered her request seriously. "I think we can simulate a very basic scenario. It might help you understand the subtleties involved." With a nod from Tom, David stood and offered his hand to Mira in a gentle, inviting gesture. "Mira, would you like to try holding hands? It's a common way to start physical contact." Mira looked at his hand, then at David's face, reading his expression. After a brief moment, she placed her hand in his, her touch light. "Like this?" "Yes, just like that," David confirmed, ensuring his grip was gentle and non-threatening. "And this is usually seen as a sign of comfort and mutual interest between humans." Mira's hand remained in David's for a few seconds before she withdrew it, her face thoughtful. "I see. It is quite comforting." Tom smiled. "It's simple, but it can be very meaningful. Physical touch is a powerful communicator among humans." The next part of the lesson involved demonstrating a hug, which David explained beforehand. A hug is another common form of affection and comfort among humans. It's a little more personal than hand-holding. "If you're comfortable, we can try that as well," David offered, his tone open and non-pressuring. Mira agreed, and David showed her how to give a friendly hug. The embrace was brief and careful, respecting her comfort and the learning context. "I understand better now," Mira said as she stepped back, a slight smile on her face. "Your customs of expressing affection are quite intricate and tender." "That's the idea," Tom added. "It's all about building connections and expressing emotions safely and respectfully." As the evening drew to a close, the trio discussed other human customs, with Mira asking insightful questions that showed her growing understanding of and respect for human emotional expressions. Through these gentle beginnings, Mira was not only learning about human behaviors, but also experiencing the warmth and complexity of human relationships firsthand. A week had passed since Mira's lesson on human affection through touch, and she had become increasingly comfortable with these human expressions. It was a mild, sunny afternoon when David and Tom decided to introduce her to another common human experience, cooking together as a form of bonding. "Today we thought it might be fun to cook a meal together," David suggested as they gathered in the kitchen. "It's a way many humans share time, work together, and build relationships." Mira looked intrigued. "On Xiloth, meals are often synthesized. This process of preparing food is new to me. What will we make?" "How about a simple pasta dish?" Tom proposed. "It's easy and allows for a lot of collaboration." Mira nodded eagerly, and they began. David explained each ingredient as they went along, from the ripe tomatoes and fresh basil to the garlic and olive oil. Mira took her time smelling each ingredient, her face lighting up with curiosity. "Each component has its own role," David explained while guiding her hands through the process of chopping tomatoes. Together, they create a harmonious dish. Mira took the knife cautiously, following David's movements. "There is an art to this, a rhythm." "Yes, exactly," Tom added as he started boiling water on the stove. "Cooking is as much about the process as it is about the outcome." The kitchen filled with laughter and the aromatic sense of cooking food. Mira was quick to learn, her movements becoming more confident as they progressed. She was particularly fascinated by the act of sautéing garlic, watching intently as David demonstrated. "Smell changes as it cooks," she observed, a hint of delight in her voice. "It does," David agreed. "It becomes sweeter, less sharp. Cooking is full of little transformations like that." As the pasta cooked, Tom showed Mira how to mix the sauce. "Stirring is important. It's about patience and care, making sure everything blends well without burning." Mira stirred the sauce, her focus complete. "There is a balance to be maintained," she noted. "Exactly," Tom said, watching her. "Much like in relationships, wouldn't you say, David?" David nodded, smiling at the analogy. "Sometimes you need to stir slowly, and other times you might need a bit more heat." When the meal was ready, they set the table and sat down to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Mira took her first bite cautiously, then her face broke into a smile. "This is delicious," she exclaimed, visibly pleased. "And to think we made it together, it adds to the flavor." "That's part of why cooking together is such a bonding activity," David explained. "It's not just about the food. It's about the shared effort and the shared success." The conversation drifted towards other human activities that bonded individuals. Mira was keen to learn about sports, music, and other hobbies that humans engaged in together. "Each activity has its own way of bringing people closer," Tom elaborated. "Whether it's by creating something together, like in cooking, or achieving a goal together, like in sports." Mira listened intently, her understanding of human interactions deepening with each explanation. "Your world is very interconnected through these shared experiences," she reflected. As the day wound down, the sense of camaraderie in the room was palpable. Mira had not only learned how to prepare a meal, but had also experienced the joy and connection that came with creating something with others, a fundamental human experience. "I am grateful for this lesson," Mira said as they cleared the table. "Today was about more than food. It was about unity and the pleasure of shared endeavors." David and Tom exchanged a look of mutual understanding, pleased with her insight. "And we're just as grateful to learn from you, Mira," David replied, "about your perspectives and experiences from Xiloth." The day ended with plans to explore more human activities together, each looking forward to the new experiences and deeper bonds that would surely form. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over David's living room where he and Mira were seated across from each other, a sense of mutual respect filling the air. The past weeks had been enlightening for both, with each day bringing new understanding and deeper connections. Mira broke the silence, her voice measured yet curious. "David, I have been reflecting on our discussions about human intimacy and reproduction. With your consent, I wish to understand it not just theoretically but practically. This is a delicate subject, and I rely on your guidance to explore this aspect of human behavior." David nodded, understanding the weight of her request. "Mira, I appreciate your trust in me. This is a significant aspect of human life, and if we are to proceed, it must be with clear consent and mutual respect at every step. Tom, who had joined them to help facilitate the conversation, added, "And it's important that we communicate openly. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, Mira, you can and should say so." Mira agreed, "I understand. Your approach to consent and communication is something I deeply respect. Please guide me through this." "Let's start simply," David suggested. They moved to a more private setting to provide a comfortable space. David began by explaining the importance of touch in human relationships, starting with holding hands, which they had practiced before. As humans, physical touch can be comforting and a way of expressing care, David explained as he gently offered his hand to Mira. Mira took his hand, her touch cautious but curious. They progressed slowly, sitting closer, sharing the warmth of a gentle embrace. "This is nice," Mira commented, a hint of surprise in her voice. "It's warm, comforting." "Yes, it's meant to be," David replied. "It's about sharing warmth and comfort." They continued with slow, respectful steps. David carefully explained each process, ensuring Mira was comfortable and consenting throughout. They explored the basics of human kissing, the touch that is often a prelude to deeper intimacy. "This is how humans share affection," David said softly, demonstrating a gentle kiss on the back of her hand first to show intention without presumption. Mira nodded. "I see. It's very personal, very direct." With each step, they paused, discussing their feelings and thoughts, maintaining an open line of communication. When they eventually decided to move forward, it was with a shared understanding and explicit consent. David and Mira's experience together was approached academically yet with a gentle care for the emotional dimensions involved. They explored the human act of making love, focusing on the connection and mutual pleasure that characterized the experience. "This is quite different from Zilothian methods," Mira observed afterward, reflecting on the experience. "There is much more focus on mutual pleasure and emotional connection here." "Yes," David agreed. "It's about connecting on multiple levels: physical, emotional, and spiritual." As they lay beside each other, Mira turned to David, her expression thoughtful. "I understand now why humans value this connection so highly. It's powerful and profound." David smiled, pleased with her understanding and respectful of her perspective. "It's one of the most personal experiences humans can share." Their discussion ventured into the implications of intimacy, the emotional bonds it can create, and how it differs so markedly between their cultures. Mira was keen to understand not just the physical but also the emotional aftermath of such closeness. "This experience will greatly enrich the understanding between our species," Mira concluded, her voice filled with a new depth of appreciation for human intricacies. David nodded. "And I've learned from you as well, Mira. Your perspective challenges and broadens my own." As they dressed and prepared to rejoin Tom, they agreed that the experience had not only bridged their cultural divide but deepened their mutual respect and friendship. They rejoined Tom, who was supportive and understanding, ready to continue their journey of intercultural and interpersonal exploration together. In the soft light of early morning, David, Tom, and Mira gathered in the kitchen for breakfast. The mood was contemplative as their time together was drawing to a close. Mira was scheduled to return to Zloth later that day, and the weight of her departure hung over them. David broke the silence as he served the coffee. "Mira, as your journey with us comes to an end, I'd like to know how your views changed since you arrived." Mira sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "I came here with a mission to learn, but I am leaving with much more than knowledge. I now understand that human experiences are deeply enriched by emotions and connections. It's something we Zilothians observe, but rarely engage in." Tom, leaning back against the counter, added, "And we've learned a lot from you, too, about your culture, your efficiency, and your ways of understanding the universe." Mira smiled slightly. "It's been an exchange, then, not just of knowledge, but of worlds." David nodded. "Exactly. What would you say was the most impactful part of your stay?" "Without hesitation," Mira replied, "understanding human intimacy and the significance of emotional bonds. It's a dimension of existence that we know less about. The day we spent exploring human reproduction methods was particularly enlightening. It highlighted the complexity of human relationships." Tom chuckled softly. That was a brave day for all of us. Yes, Mira agreed, laughing along. But essential. It made me appreciate the nuances of your lives. Humans are not just driven by logic or survival, but by a profound sense of togetherness and belonging. David listened, pleased with her insight. We hope that these lessons will help foster greater understanding and possibly even influence interactions between our species in the future. Mira looked between the two men, her expression serious. I intend to share everything I've learned here, not just the scientific observations, but the emotional insights as well. Perhaps it can lead to a deeper connection between Zeloth and Earth. As they finished breakfast, they moved to the living room to enjoy the last few moments together. Tom presented Mira with a small gift, a book of human poetry. We thought you might like this, Tom said. It's another way to understand our emotions and culture. Mira accepted it gratefully. Thank you, Tom. David. This means a lot to me. David stood up, ready to accompany her to the departure point. It's been an honor, Mira. Remember, this isn't goodbye. It's just until next time. Mira nodded, her eyes reflective. I will not forget this experience or either of you. Thank you for everything. As they drove to the spaceport, the car was filled with a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the week spent together. When they arrived, they exchanged a heartfelt farewell, promising to keep in touch and perhaps visit one another in the future. Watching Mira's spacecraft lift off, David felt a mix of sadness and satisfaction. We did good, Tom, he said quietly. Tom nodded, watching the sky. We did. Let's hope the future brings more such exchanges. As they returned home, both men felt a sense of accomplishment and a newfound appreciation for their own human experiences, enriched and challenged by the presence of an extraordinary visitor from another world. The journey with Mira had been a profound reminder of the complexities and beauties of human culture, something they would carry forward in their personal and professional lives.